Hello and welcome back to the Eyes on the NFL podcast. I'm your host along with co-host Joe Spinoza here, and we are coming into week 8 of the NFL season. Some big trades happening, some big things to discuss regarding some preconceived Super Bowl contenders. But before we get into that, Joe, how are you doing today? Joe, you're muted.
God damn it.
You were muted, Joe.
Oh, well, all is well, Evo. All is well. Just getting by, it's mid-season. The weather is still nice up here in New England. A lovely New England fall. It was like 60 today. It's going to be, 50s, 60s. Not terrible. So kind of soaking it in.
That's really great to hear. I'm doing well myself. Real quick, subscribe to the channel and turn on post notifications. Follow us on Twitter at EvoKnowsAll31 and at RealJoeSpinoza. Remember to spell that real with an L, along with our channel's Twitter account at Eyes on the NFL for all the best clips. Without further ado, let's get into some trade talks. So the biggest one so far is the Christian McCaffrey trade to the San Francisco 49ers just a week after Matt Rule got fired. Joe, how do you feel about this trade? I'm going to try and pull up the compensation right now.
It was a second, third, fourth, and fifth.
Yeah. I think I know where you're going to stand on this, but
I'm actually going to be a little bit different than most would think. Of course, you know me and running backs. I'm not a fan of it. If my team did it, I would say, what are you doing? However, this trade for this player in this situation, not saying it's good, but it's way less egregious than like any other trade involving a running back would be. And the main components are, A, the NFC is so wide open that anything you can do to get better matters, because whenever you're trading picks for players, you're always getting better in the short term. Secondly, McCaffrey is probably the only running back that I would say is a legit difference maker in the pass game, to an extent of not just catching passes out of the backfield, but doing different things, compounding that with Deebo Samuel and just all the different formations, and let Kyle Shanahan be a mad scientist. I think that's great. And then the last thing is the contract, which I actually view as a slight positive. It's essentially, if you include this year, it's a 4-year, $37 million deal. So in terms of AAV, it's great. There's no guaranteed money, and there's so much restructure possibility that will not really harm you in any significant way going forward, while also giving you a 2 to 3 year window. And then lastly, San Fran drafts at least one running back, usually two. One guy in day 2, another guy in day 3. So instead of taking swings on those guys, you get probably the potentially most valuable player at that position when he's right. So if we want to do, on the fly, trade grades, for Carolina, I give it an A, just because they're rebuilding and you got pretty significant package of picks. But I give this a B-, a B minus for San Fran, which under any other circumstances, a big trade for a back would be an F.
So the Christian McCaffrey thing, I understand why they did it, but I disagree with it. I understand because, the blueprint was set last year. The Rams went all in at the trade deadline. They were a team that could have been in contention. Like you could throw them in those teams that could have played for Super Bowl. But after that trade deadline, it seemed like they just leveled up. And, this season, it seems like the Niners are kind of on that trajectory. They've been kind of average so far and underperforming. So going and getting a big difference maker like Christian McCaffrey, with Jeff Wilson getting hurt, with Elijah Mitchell getting hurt, I understand the move. But you're hindering your future. And with all those picks, you have to think about how, the hit rate on running backs in the third and second round these past few years has been insane. It seems like you really can't miss on a running back. And Kenneth Walker, Brees Hall, Jonathan Taylor. I'm missing many guys. Dalvin Cook is one of them. So these are guys that they're not hard to find. And you just gave up many picks that you could have drafted a running back with. And I know none of them are probably going to be Christian McCaffrey. But that brings me to my next point. Jeff Wilson was on track to get 1,400 yards, I believe. Elijah Mitchell last year was doing very well. So if that doesn't show you that your system is already good enough to produce good running backs, and if you went and drafted one in the third round, I know they tried that with Trey Sermon and he didn't quite work out, but I think that was an outlier and more than the rule.
Tyrion Davis-Price, I know it's early, but they drafted him in the third. Returns don't look great there.
So maybe it's just the fact that they don't trust that, but especially their main problem has not been really drafting running backs, because you see, a lot of these guys that they're drafting, they've been playing well. Elijah Mitchell, Jeff Wilson, they've been getting injured and they're too injury prone. So what do? You go and trade this massive overhaul for a guy whose biggest concern is injuries and who hasn't played, I think, more than 8 games in a season for 3 years because of his injuries.
That's misleading, Evo.
Especially for a medical staff that has proven to not be good. It's just not a good medical staff.
With McCaffrey, his first 3 years in the league, 17, 18, 19, played every game possible. He got hurt in 2020 and 2021. And those injuries, for Vikings fans out there, because we are a Viking-centric podcast, very similar. I could make the same arguments you hear about Danielle Hunter. They would talk about him coming back from his injuries, playing 6 games in 2 years. Very similar to McCaffrey. His injury in 2020 was the hamstring, and that's concerning for a back. But then last year, 2020 was not the hamstring. That my bad. 2021. I'm on his Wikipedia right now. He suffered a shoulder injury, and that's what caused him to miss the 2020 season. That is not an injury that I'm like, wow, I'm very nervous about that. The hamstring is something you'll have to monitor, but he's played all 7 games possible this year. He played all 16 games before that. Even using a very strict and I guess not nice aging curve for running backs, he's still only 26. So if you want to use 28, you still get this year and next of him firmly being in his prime. And then you might even be able to squeeze out age 28. And then after that, non-guaranteed, you move some money, you make it a void year. You're still only eating, $2 million in dead cap to boost your ceiling this much. It's honestly all going to come down to how much does he factor in the pass game and how much does having him and Deebo Samuel out there at the same time, motioning, switching spots, McCaffrey going from Garoppolo's right into the slot and Deebo coming in and all of these different things, how much does that force multiplier effect improve your offense? That's the question.
Good point. Jimmy Garoppolo, this is a move to cater to Jimmy Garoppolo. If Trey Lance was in, no matter how bad Trey Lance looked, I don't think they do this deal. And that's because Jimmy Garoppolo is check down merchant is a cliche now. But he is a check down merchant. He's a screens merchant. And who's probably the best in the league when it comes to screens? Christian McCaffrey, who's probably the best, or not the best in open space, but
up there
in that tier 1 of guys in open space, Christian McCaffrey. So again, I understand where the move is coming from. I'm just saying I would not have pulled the trigger.
Oh, I agree. And I guess I'm sort of playing devil's advocate again. I do not love the move, but I'll just say I understand it. Like, it kind of goes, if you just want to go with any sort of divisive issue, there are some things like I just can't get on board with your thinking at all. Like, you are so far off. This is something that's like, probably wouldn't have done it, but I see what you're doing. And I got to say, props to Kyle Shanahan, because I feel like a lot of deadline moves are mainly prompted by coaching, just because you have to integrate guys so quickly. This is truly you bring in a guy for your scheme. You can't cater anything to a guy you're bringing in, really. You just have to hit the ground running. So I really admire Kyle Shanahan. I would think he initiated it. His dad coached Christian McCaffrey's dad. I heard Kyle Shanahan used to babysit Christian McCaffrey back in the 90s. And I appreciate him going in, not for that reason, but putting pressure on himself. He could easily have said, okay, you know what? It's a weak NFC. We'll still probably make the playoffs. The Rams suck. Cardinals suck. Seahawks are cute, whatever. We could still win the division at 10-7 and maybe make the NFC Championship. I can blame it on Trey Lance getting hurt. But he's saying, no, I'm going to double down. And last point, they do have a ton of end of day 3 picks because Rob Saleh, Mike McDaniel, and then there was another guy on their coaching staff who got poached away. And if you're an ethnic minority, if you're a team whose assistant coach is an ethnic minority and they get hired as a head coach or get a promotion somewhere else, you get a comp pick. So they got like 3 comp picks for Mike McDaniel, Rob Saleh, and I think even another guy who might have been promoted to like a coordinator position somewhere. So they got like 3 third-round picks from that.
I mean, so they're not. I mean, sacrificing their future might not be the correct term, but I mean, in terms of they don't really have picks. They don't. They'll get their comp picks for this, but
They got 4.
One trade that kind of shines. It doesn't make this trade look any better. If anything, it makes it look worse. Is the James Robinson to New York deal after Breece Hall got injured and Travis Etienne, it looks like the clear number 1 guy in Jacksonville. Looking at this, it says the Jags get 2 6th-round picks in 23. Nothing crazy. So 2 6th-round picks. A guy who I think James Robinson can be recognized as an average to above average running back. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So,
in 5th and a 6th, essentially.
First, before we compare this to the Christian McCaffrey trade, I do like the trade for the Jets because maybe you don't think Michael Carter is your guy. There's a reason why you threw Breece Hall in there, and you're 5-2. This isn't just the Jets anymore. You need to be looking at right now. You should be looking at winning the division. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're tied with the Bills for the division lead. So, I mean, you're 5-2. You're tied for the division lead. Will you win the division? Probably not. But as a front office, you shouldn't be saying that. You should be saying, let's go get this division win. Let's lock up a home game in the playoffs, or at the very least, get to the playoffs. Let's not fall off. So when arguably their best player of the season so far goes down, they immediately go and replace him with someone who isn't going to be as good, who isn't going to get the touches or the opportunities because he's not Breece Hall. I mean, I like the move. It's an aggressive move for the Jets, and you really didn't have to give up that much.
Oh, I absolutely love it. Obviously, you still got worse considering Breece Hall got hurt, and he was sensational. Really helped carry that offense. But yeah, you gave it's going to be a 5th and a 6th unless Robinson gets hurt. He only needs 250 more yards the rest of the season for the pick to go from a 6th to a 5th. Still a good value. He's a good running back. Again, just a running back. And my problem with comparing this to McCaffrey is because the 49ers would not be in the mood. It's like we have 4 guys who, considering our system, can be a James Robinson. It's not about that. It's about getting someone who is transcendent. And McCaffrey, when he is on the field, if you go back to that 2019 season, I make my metrics and I take all these things, and what he was able to do in the passing game, even his average depth of target was closer to a slot receiver than it was to any other running back. What he's able to do, it's just a totally different category of player that it's kind of unfair. Was Robinson a home run slam dunk value? But it's kind of like, if you're going to, whatever store, you could say, hey, I went to Marshall's I love Marshalls. Listen, I'm not rolling in that cash. I love Marshalls or Kohl's. I got this.
Oh, we know you love Kohl's, Joe.
No, but hey, I got this polo, like a nice Ralph Lauren polo shirt for $25 over at Marshalls. Yeah, it's better value than going to Barbour and getting a shirt for $150. But again, if you want that Barbour shirt, you're gonna just have to spend it. That's just how it rolls. So it's kind of hard to compare. It's unfair, but overall, I love the move for the Jets, and the McCaffrey thing again. I understand it.
And then finally, the other big trade. There's obviously been little trades, but the 6-0 Eagles acquire Robert Quinn from the Bears for essentially a 4th-round pick.
No Jonathan Hankins talk?
No, doesn't move me. I like the deal. Their front four was already menacing. You add another guy, and now you're just gonna have just rotating. I mean, one guy comes off, Hassan Reddick comes off, you have to deal with Robert Quinn. Fletcher Cox comes off, you have to deal with Jordan Davis. And it's the cycle that it's going to be really hard to beat this team up front. They have by far the best D-line and offensive line. And for a 6-0 team who is very clearly the best team in the NFC, and you could argue is the best team in the NFL right now, to just get better is really good. And then to give up a 4th-round pick, you're not scoffing. You're not like, that 4th-round pick means nothing to you right now. Nothing. A 4th-round pick would be great for the Vikings, but I like it. And contract isn't that bad after looking further into it.
And Chicago's paying all of his salary this year, so they don't have to do anything this year. So that makes it even better from Philly's standpoint. So they can continue to wheel and deal because they're still at a pick surplus. They have New Orleans 1st-round pick, which is going to be top 10.
They could make a blockbuster deal with that pick.
Yeah, and they still have, again, they didn't do anything in terms of their money this year, so they can still take on a player. They can restructure lots of guys. They could take in a $15 million player right now, if they wanted to, depending on who shakes free. I absolutely love it. And a lot of fans, because they like to look at, the starting lineups, which, again, that's important. That's nice to see. Like I personally fall into this trap too. If I like going on PFF and I like seeing a page full of green and blue on look at the starting lineup. And when Daniil and Za'Darius are there and they're both 80 graded players and Kendricks is good. And if your worst starting defensive player is Jordan Hicks or Cam Bynum, that's really good. But then the depth that's what really makes teams great. And if you look at the Eagles, I don't think the Eagles have an edge rusher as good as Danielle Hunter or Darius Smith. Their front four blow, if you just want to say as a unit, their defensive line, including edges, blow the Vikings out of the water and blow a lot of teams out of the water because they go so deep. Robert Quinn is going from being the guy who is, chipped, and the fullback is, if he's playing, is going to focus on him, and the tight end is eating up double teams and all of this stuff. He goes from that playing 75, 80% of snaps and getting worn down in the run game where he's not good to playing 25, 30 snaps a game, pinning his ears back. Last year, when he had 18 sacks and had a renaissance season, looked like the All-Pro Hall of Fame Robert Quinn from 2013, he spent the majority of his snaps kind of the inverse, like what we see with Danielle Hunter, as an outside linebacker. This year, Eberflus comes in. He has played strictly as a defensive end. He has 5 snaps, with his hand not in the dirt. As we see, that makes a difference for a lot of guys of how you're aligned, where you're coming off. So he can just pin his ears back, come in as an outside linebacker, standing up, pass rusher, using that speed rush, which is still fantastic. I think you could see massive dividends from this trade. I love it. I love it.
And it just puts them another tier above everybody else. It's scary. Right now, I seriously cannot see a scenario where they lose in the playoffs. they're going to be at home for the entire thing unless there's just a collapse. They have the depth, which is often a problem in the playoffs. They can sustain injuries, which I hope doesn't happen. But they're able to maybe get an injury bug and still come out of it looking like a really good team still. So it's unreal. It seems like nothing can really phase this team unless you. The only way you can beat this team is if you like hard stop the run early. Like you gotta stop the run like really early, like
And
first
you
drive
got
of
to
the
keep
game.
them off balance because the key is that with that rotation is they have a personnel to where if they can kind of see like if you're behind, they can just kind of pin their ears back and they can put Robert Quinn out there, who is a huge plus if you're passing. But if you're running, he's a liability. And you kind of weigh those probabilities. Like he is, X amount of a positive and as a pass rusher, X amount is a negative in run defense. So like if we're, going by calculations, tendencies, and say, this team has a 75+% chance of passing, Robert Quinn is going to be a massive, massive asset. And that's the thing is if you get behind them and you start trailing and they know what you're going to do, you're screwed. You need to really be balanced so that you can kind of keep their personnel at bay.
It seems like one of the only, like, I'm sure as we go on in the season and a team finally beats them or teams play them really close, we'll see what this team's weaknesses are. And I think the two most likely weaknesses is the middle of the field for them because they can't just shadow the entire game, and Jalen Hurts. And as of right now, Jalen Hurts isn't a weakness, but he's the second most probable weakness if one were to arise. Right now, the only way to beat the Eagles is to jump out to a lead early, and that is way easier said than done.
Oh, it really is, and kind of keep them guessing, keep them guessing both on offense and defense. I guess at the end of the day, just try to get into Hurts's head.
You have to force Hurts to make decisions, but you have to force him to make them in the pocket. Because if you force him to make a decision outside the pocket, it's very likely he's going to make the right one, and that's just going to tuck the ball and run.
And also, don't insult him the way the Vikings did that Week 2 game by just leaving him the most wide open throws. Like he might not be I don't think he's a fantastic passer, but I think that he's a solid passer, and he can complete wide open throws. So I like the idea. If you want to just go back to that game, the Vikings game of the general, like trying to contain him and whatever, but don't let him make the windows a little bit tighter.
I think a team with these elite corners, like if the Vikings had some elite corners, that game would have been that game probably would have been a lot closer. Obviously the entire team played awful, so I'm not just gonna pin it on the corners, but it allows you to execute your game plan easier and not play for behind. So it increases your chances at least. To move on from the Eagles, we're talking about the best team in the NFC and a team that is a contender, but two teams that were supposed to be contenders to start the season are both off to, I believe, 3-4 starts. The Bucks coming off a loss, 21-3, no touchdown against the Carolina Panthers. And then the Packers, who lost the Commanders 23-21. I'm just going to read off the last 3 games for each of these teams, and you tell me if this team is a contender. We have.
When you say contender, define the parameters because people are very finical, whatever.
For me, a contender is a team that can closely compete for a championship. Because obviously, if it was just can they win a Super Bowl, there's probably 2, or 3. But like a team, because right now I'd consider the Vikings contenders after much thought, but that's only because there's really no other options. There's got to be more than one contender because there's more variables in that.
Especially in a sport like football. If it's basketball and you have you have the peak Warriors. And then it's like you have the Warriors, then you have like maybe LeBron can put up a fight, and then no one else. But it's football. You can't have it like that.
It's one game. not
Exactly.
7.
I say, that, can you make the Final Four? That's how I'll say it. Like, is there a realistic chance you can make it to the conference championship?
I mean, but honestly, even with a loose explanation or definition of contender, you're fighting an uphill battle putting them in that conversation, both of them at this time in the season, because the Bucks played the Panthers, lost 21-3. They played the Steelers, lost 20-18. They played the Falcons. They beat them 21-15, but one could argue that game would have gone a completely different direction if there's not just a blatantly obvious roughing the passer call, or no call, I should say. The Packers have lost to the Commanders 23-21, the Jets 27-10, and the Giants 27-22. That's a more respectable, or it would be more respectable slate of losses, because the Giants and the Jets, they're not the old Giants and the Jets, but I still think there's a little bit of fraudulence there. Like, I think their records aren't fraudulent, but I think them as a team are fraudulent. But one thing you have to think about, Packers were up, what was it, 20-0 against the Giants? They were up
I think, by at least 2 scores.
They were up by 2 scores against the Giants going into the half. They were up 20-10, or I know they were up against the Jets. I don't know the exact scores. They were up against the Jets, and they were up 20-10 against the Commanders. This team can't hold on to leads, and it's because they are a running team. They cannot be forced to, or wait, never mind. I don't really know what's up with them. Their defense is supposed to be their catalyst that kind of just drag them to the playoffs and maybe a Super Bowl. It's not doing that. It's being very easily exploited right now. Jair doesn't look like himself. Eric Stokes has dropped off significantly since last year. The Bucks, their offensive line is just so atrocious. And with a guy like Tom Brady, who is bricks for feet, he can't run because of his age, and that's just not his play style. He's having to settle for these checkdowns or highly pressured deep shots. Not to mention the Mike Evans drop. There's been some crucial drops. Is Tom Brady completely just, there's no fault on him at all? No, but the offensive line is the fault.
That's unfair. And I understand why, because the thing with Green Bay is that you can clearly point to where their major issue is. Yeah, their defense, some guys have underperformed. Rodgers has regressed, but he's still pretty good. It's the receivers. With Tampa, it's kind of like the line, it's not great. They went from being top 3, I think, to being probably middle of the pack. But let's not act like they are a complete disaster. They are the Bengals and Vikings from last year. They are the Dolphins. You look at the I'm going to their grades because I think Donovan Smith missed 1 game, maybe 2 out of 7. So you still have the stud tackles. Tristan Wirfs and Donovan Smith are all-pro, Pro Bowl tackles. You have Shaq Mason, who is as good as ever as a guard. So you have 3 of your 5 linemen, not just serviceable, elite. Then you have Gadecki, who has struggled, and Hainsey, your center, it's been good. Like, if you just want to go by PFF, by every metric you can use, even just like seeing him, they have 1 weak link who's a rookie and I think can improve. Their entire team, there's just something off. And I don't know. Because I don't see that massive decline in Brady, I still see him making throws with zip. Same thing with Rodgers. It's not 2015 Peyton Manning. It's not 2020 Drew Brees. They're both, I still think, top 10 quarterbacks, at least. And there's talent on their rosters. I'm not writing them off. If Green Bay goes out and trades for Brandon Cooks, and maybe even another guy. What?
They won't. This is like Miles Turner. Brandon Cooks is like Miles Turner. Like, he's been in I know he's been traded oftentimes before, but since he's been on the Texans, it's literally every year he's rumored to go to the Packers, and it just doesn't happen. It's not going to happen now. And even if it does, that doesn't make their team all that much better.
I disagree. I disagree because you at least have someone. I think like his numbers and his consistency would point to him being a number one. He's not, but he's a 1A. Like he's better than like pretty much every like number two. He's still a top 30 receiver. He's good. And maybe you go out there and you trade for Gesicki also. You bring in those two guys who again aren't world beaters, but there's something. They're respectable. It's not Lazard and Dobbs as your only receivers. And then Tampa just getting better, just kind of growing. Again, it's just the way the NFC is. I'll phrase it to you like this, Evo, and I'm not talking playing them right now, but I'm saying you have to lock it in. So you have to do a little foresight and predict. No injuries, but the teams stay the same. You're guaranteed the Vikings are the 2 seed. You have a home playoff game. You can pick your opponent. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Green Bay Packers, New York Giants. You have to lock in your wild card opponent right now. No injuries, no alterations to the teams. Who do you want to play?
If it's this team, the team that I'm seeing right now,
it's what you think they're going to be in mid-January. And you're saving the date for whenever wild card weekend is. Wild card weekend.
Packers.
Really?
Yes. And honestly, I'm struggling to see a reason why I wouldn't put the Giants above the Bucks. And I'll tell you like this. I'll tell you like this. Yes, their rosters are. I don't even know if you could say the Packers roster is better than the Giants.
Oh, it is. Stop.
But the Giants.
Stop.
The Giants are in these close games, right? And they're playing pretty decent teams. I wouldn't say the Jags are bad. Would you say that? They're not horrible.
Fine.
They're like a mid team, I think. They're not what they're better than the record shows.
Slightly below mid.
Yeah, Ravens above average team. Can we agree?
Oh yeah, of course.
And then we have the team that is in the discussion, the Packers. If I'm not mistaken, their only loss comes to the Cowboys, which is a top 5 team in my opinion. They're playing these teams tight and they're winning. See, the difference between the two teams is the fact that the Giants are playing, I think, better teams in the past, and they're finding ways to win. Now, what's underrated is we can talk about the fact that the Giants have been in too many close games and they don't deserve it, but what a lot of playoff teams do is they win the games that they're not supposed to win. And a lot of these games, it seems like they're not supposed to win the games, and they pull it out, whether that because their defense makes better stops. They make great plays. Because the Jags punted so many times. And yes, Etienne broke a few big plays, but I honestly think that was just Etienne making plays. The Packers, on the other hand, seem like they just can't do anything. They can't do anything. And who am I to say that it's going to get better because it has been better? Because this is a Packers defense that was top 3 last year and has dropped to bottom 10. They have been bottom 10 in the league so far. Aaron Rodgers, I know that the receivers are not there, and that is the biggest issue. He has no weapons. But Aaron Rodgers also hasn't really looked like himself. And Aaron Rodgers, I know he's been a douchebag before, and he's just been that prick before, but it's never been to this extent. It's never been like every single time the camera cuts to him, he's cussing at one of his players or he's shaking in disbelief. There seems like there is a huge rift in the locker room, and that's been said before, but this time it's real, and that's because they're losing games. And once that starts, it just starts to pile up. Right now, I don't think the Packers are going to make the playoffs.
What I'll say is the Packers are in a it's like there's like pros and cons on both sides. Kind of like if you're just comparing Tampa and Green Bay, it's like on one hand, Green Bay, you say there's clear personnel things that we can do within the next week to at least buy us time to say, hey, we can figure this out if we just upgrade. Like our receiving core is so bad that even just adding a Brandon Cooks can elevate it to a level of respectability that will make us better. Whereas Tampa, there's really not much you can add that would make that much of a difference. Because like you're kind of set everywhere. Like you had some depth, but that's not solving your issues. On the other hand, Tampa can go 8-9, dare I say 7-10, and win their division if they lost to Carolina, but we know Carolina's not going to be in it. So they already have the game versus Atlanta. They already have a game in hand against New Orleans, who again I don't think is doing anything either. So it's like you can go 7-10 and win your division. You're going to get a home playoff game. I could see if it was just these two teams, but you are seeing on a weekly basis the Chargers lose to the Seahawks. Obviously we see the Bucks and Packers losing. The Rams dropping games that they shouldn't. Like so many different teams are dropping games all over the place that it's kind of hard to pin down. Like, is this just a really weird year and will things normalize? Because I'll just be honest. If you told me I could lock in an opponent, I'd rather face the Giants. I'm sorry. I would rather face the Giants on January 15th. If you said you have to lock them in, that's who you're going to play. That's your wild card opponent coming into US Bank Stadium for January 15th. I'm sorry. I'm taking the Giants. I definitely don't want Tampa. Green Bay, I don't know. I don't want another division. I wouldn't want another third round division game. No, give me the Giants easily.
Okay. So, I mean, we already discussed. I think we're still both picking the Bucks to win that division, correct?
Yeah, I still have the Bucks going to the Super Bowl. Yep.
I'm just going to ignore that.
What?
So we've established what we think the Bucks are going to do. You think they're going to win the Super Bowl. I think they're at least a playoff team, just because that division is so bad.
They're in the divisional round. They're going to be in the divisional round. They're going to beat Dallas. We saw them kick Dallas's ass, and they did not look good, and that was with Dak. They're going to beat Dallas. They would definitely beat the Giants. I don't care what will happen in the regular season. No, I don't see that. Only San Francisco. If it's San Francisco, only team I could see beating them in the wild card in Tampa. You're already in the divisional round. Anything goes.
Okay, so then what do you think is going to come from the Packers? Because they play the Bills this week, which if they lose that, they're sitting at 3-5.
But just how weird would it be if they won? Like you drop games as double-digit favorites to the commies, and like you're dropping games to the Jets and Giants and all this, and then you go out into Buffalo and you win. Like that would just be the ultimate mind bleep.
Yeah. I don't know what to predict from the Packers. If this was a normal year and the Packers were doing this, I'd say no, they're not making the playoffs. But right now we see the Seahawks and the Giants and the Falcons and all these teams competing for playoff berths. And it's like, not the Giants, but the Packers have to be better than the Falcons and the Seahawks. Like they have to be. I know they haven't looked better, but they just have to be better. Like there's no way they're not.
A big game is going to be the week before that Thanksgiving game, Dallas at home for Green Bay. That's a game to look at because let's just say they split the next two with at Buffalo and then against One Pride. So then you go in and you're 4-5 against Dallas. That's your get right game, the chance to get to 500. I know Dallas is ahead of you, but again, the way the league works, they could drop a few games quite easily. You'd have the tiebreaker on them. I still think that there's a path for them. Looking at
there's definitely a path. I mean, as it stands right now, with the Giants and Cowboys both being 5-1, or one of them being 6-1, like there's a path, and the Giants could very well drop a few games and fall out of it completely. But like right now, with what the teams look like, it's going to be a bloodbath for the 7th seed. It's going to be the 49ers, who I think is going to be the most likely to take it, or the Rams, or like whoever loses that NFC, what is it, NFC West battle. You got the Seahawks, you have Falcons, you have.
Let me look at the Giants' schedule.
I don't know. I don't right now. I'm not picking the Packers to make the playoffs.
I mean, their schedule still is very favorable. Wow, you got Seattle, where they're underdogs, which is crazy. Then you got the bye. Then coming out, you got Houston in one pride at home. Then you got Dallas, 2 games versus the Commies. You got the Sam Ellinger Colts. Maybe we can
Ellinger.
talk about that. Yeah, Giants. I was gonna say I could see the Giants imploding, but considering the lead they got, the tiebreaker they got on Green Bay, they're already 6-1. They can, going back to the post I was making about the Vikings, they can go 4-6 and still go 10-7. So there's that. But what are your thoughts on Sam Ellinger? Is it Ellinger or Ellinger?
I've heard it both. I say Ellinger.
Okay,
Ellinger.
I'll say Ellinger. That's why I
Ellinger.
was saying it first.
Sam Ellinger. Sammy Heisman is his nickname. Texas fan here. Very good. Very good at running the football RPO schemes. With a run and heavy offense with Jonathan Taylor, people are going to start to bite on Jonathan Taylor. He can get out in space. And even I think he's best when he's not in space, just plowing through people. Pause. He's really good at that. His arm is definitely a question, and that's a reason why he's not an NFL starter right now. But his comp would be Josh Allen if Josh Allen kind of just wasn't good at throwing. That's kind of what he is.
So, like I said this off air, but like a right-handed Tim Tebow.
Yes. And ironically, I made the joke in the group chat earlier. Like, the guy should be playing tight end, if we're being honest.
Well, let's just
his brother played tight end. Rest in peace to him. But yeah,
who?
His brother played tight end. I think they both played tight end in high school, but he wanted to play quarterback for his brother. I think that's how the story goes.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't expect much from Sam Ellinger. Not that you would, because he's a backup. But yeah, he can definitely make plays. He'll make a few plays that people are going to go, oh my gosh, why isn't he starting? But it's one of those that ESPN posts it without posting the rest of the game. He'll probably go for, I think they throw him like 18 times, like 9 for 18, 130 yards passing with probably 80 yards, not even 8, probably 70 yards rushing and a rushing touchdown is my guess stat line, which isn't that bad. That's a Justin Fields stat line.
And do they win?
Who do they play again?
The Commodores. Yeah. Well, one thing I'll just say, because again, I don't know anything about this guy. Big difference you got to consider is Josh Allen's 6'5", this guy's 6'1". That's a huge difference. You got a guy my height, and then you get a guy who is, legit big NFL tall. Can see over the line.
It sucks because I'm not going to be able to watch this game because it's at 12 during the Vikings game. But, I mean, speaking of the Vikings, if you just want to jump right into it.
Just quickly, what are your thoughts on Matt Ryan getting benched? Did it surprise you at all?
He has played awfully, and I think kind of putting your pride to the side and just like seeing if you have anything in here, because it's clear that Matt Ryan isn't going to lead you anywhere that you aspire to go. He has played awful. He was supposed to be the guy that came in for Wentz and minimized the amount of turnovers you had and kind of just made sure you got the ball up and down the field. But he's been astronomically bad, like worse than Wentz, because at least Wentz would make a play. But Matt Ryan's just throwing picks just because he can. He's fumbling and he's bad at completions. I don't remember the last time they had a passing touchdown. So
the last game they had one.
Yeah, well, not one that I can remember. All right, I didn't remember it.
Well, I'm looking at his page right now. That's why I'm.
It's just.
I mean, I think PFF is too harsh on the touchdowns to big time throw to turnover worthy plays, but 2 big time throws to 14 turnover worthy plays. That's something that tells you, because you'll see people like Kirk will be at like 9 big time throws and like 8 turnover worthy plays. Like a lot of quarterbacks will be there. But this ratio is pathetic. No.
Yeah, so, even if some of those turnover worthy plays are fraudulent, that's still a horrible ratio.
And it's inexcusable. I don't know. It just kind of comes down to Like Ellinger does not seem like he has a chance to be an NFL quarterback. Just looking at him, hearing what I hear, he's a 6'1", but he's like his game is like rushing, but he can't throw. I don't know. Like I could see if you took a kid who might be like a legit pro prospect.
But
and
see,
he was
but
there,
see,
like,
with
Malik Willis, I'd be like, okay. If you drafted Matt Corral, but you're talking Sam Ellinger.
I see where you're coming from, but you have to look at their last 3 years. Post Andrew Luck, they've had Jacoby Brissett, who was never in the long-term plans, and just frankly wasn't good. You then moved on to Phillip Rivers, who was awful in his last year. Took you to the playoffs, but he wasn't good.
No, he was not. Don't say that. I'm here to push back.
Next, you had Carson Wentz.
Dude, I'm sorry. I got to defend Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers was not awful. 4,500 yards, 26 touchdowns, 11 picks.
He didn't play
79
well.
PFF grade.
He didn't improve. Sorry, I should revise that. He didn't improve the team whatsoever.
No. They made the playoffs. Like, let's not. I mean, Matt Ryan has been awful.
Yes, but it's getting to my point. They got Carson Wentz, who just wasn't good. I know you'll defend him, but the amount of turnover-worthy plays that he provides and the amount of just mistakes that he makes wasn't built for the offense. Not good. Matt Ryan was supposed to come in and amend that. Nope, awful. So before, and I think if they're bad enough, they draft a quarterback this year. Before you do anything, just see what you have in a guy that is in his second year. Just cause, like, why not? He's played extraordinarily well in the preseason. Like, he was very good in the preseason both years. I don't see the downside, especially since Matt Ryan has been playing so bad and has been a large reason you're losing. Playing him isn't bad. And if Sam Ellinger plays bad, I guarantee you Matt Ryan isn't the first person to come in. It's Jacob Eason, third-year guy.
They already said Nick Foles is their backup.
No, never mind. Jacob Eason isn't. Yeah, Nick Foles. But still, I honestly think Nick Foles is. If Sam Ellinger fails, Nick Foles is the guy.
The Colts already announced that.
Yes, but wait, is Matt Ryan on the active roster?
Yeah, but they say he's hurt right now, so like they might. They said Ellinger's supposed to be the starter, but right now it's Foles coming in as the backup. But I guess Ryan has some sort of shoulder injury. So that might change. I think they're trying to be safe face and be nice in some sort of way. But pretty much it's Ellinger, then Foles, then Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
Which is sad. I always liked Matt Ryan. I thought he was kind of an underappreciated quarterback. If he had won that Super Bowl, which again, they're playing my team, I'm happy they didn't. But his that season and playoff run, like he was sensational every single step of the way. And the way he's looked at least the way Kurt Warner was. Probably better because Kurt Warner had 3 amazing years, sucked, was out of the league, and then comes back for like another 2 really good years. Whereas Matt Ryan was excellent for 1, really good for another 3, and still really solid for 15. But I think he'd be looked at as that like slam dunk Kurt Warner level at least guy if he had just, kneeled the ball after Julio made that catch. But I don't know. It's sad, but circle of life.
Now for the important stuff. The Minnesota Vikings.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah.
They return to the bank to play the Arizona Cardinals.
I will be there.
You will be there. You want to make an announcement or no?
Ooh, when is this being released?
Probably either tomorrow or Friday.
Okay. Let's just say I will be there. I'm going to give a pre-shout out to a very special friend, family that is getting me tickets to this game. And stay tuned for some posts on Saturday.
You can follow at Real Joe Spinoza, the Real Joe Spinoza, no fake one.
There's
Twitter.
no I other than the Spinoza. There's no I in the real.
And I'm sure Joe will get something for the Eyes on the NFL Twitter account. So for the sake of plugging it, follow the channel's Twitter at Eyes on the NFL.
Yes.
But Vikings, they play Kyler Murray. Oh, it's the week COD dropped. Not funny. The original. They play the 3-4 Cardinals, the 5-1 Vikings. I really have not much to say about this game. We kind of discussed this earlier, but I think, and this is a very real possibility. Don't get it twisted. This is a very real possibility. But I think the only way the Cardinals beat the Vikings is if Kyler Murray kind of just has his way with the Vikings defense, which honestly, there's a 30% chance that happens. I think it's a 70-30 Vikings to Cardinals win ratio. And Kyler Murray can very well take advantage of this defense. It's about breaking it, not bending it, though. So if you want to come up with the conversation points, go ahead.
Yeah, just considering the way the league's been, I tweeted this yesterday. I said, you'll see Green Bay, Tampa, the Rams, the Chargers, all these teams who are good, even the Chiefs losing to the Matt Ryan-led Colts. You'll see all these teams lose games that they shouldn't, where they're actually like touchdown plus favorites. And yet, like, the Vikings fans will look at us being 3.5-point favorites against a pretty solid team in Arizona and like lose their mind. Like, I'm sure certain fans are saying this is a must win. Like, you're not a contender if you drop this game at home. Again, you should win, but the Cardinals always pose a challenge. They're talented throughout. I'm really interested to see Rodney Hudson's status. Have you seen anything about their injury report? I know Justin Pugh's out for the year, but if they're down two of their original starting interior linemen, that's not great.
Not at all.
I saw like they have Cody Ford. They have like two guys who are like picked up off the scrap heaps from Buffalo, because Buffalo kind of did an overhaul of their line, but some like decent guys who started last year. I guess I'm going to go on Bleacher Report because I like the way they do their team feeds. Arizona, see if there's like any update. Yeah, James Conner was limited. Let me see. But I think we got to face Rodrigo Blankenship. That is rough. I do not want to face Rodrigo in the rec specs.
That guy is not that good.
Rodney Hudson didn't participate. Out of practice. DJ Humphries was out too. What's up with him? Did he play last week?
I mean,
That's because if we go to this game again, and Vikings are coming off a bye, but Arizona gets a mini bye coming off Thursday Night Football. They had Billy Price. Wow, if you want to go by pass block grade, which I know isn't perfect, but wow, this is amazing. Billy Price had an 83. Will Hernandez had an 83. Kelvin Beachum had an 83. DJ Humphries was at a 70, and then it was Max Garcia was the lone guy. But he only played 13 snaps. So
I think this is a game you gotta blitz. You have to.
Well, looking at if you just go again, PFF grade, not always perfect, but in terms of pressures allowed, they only allowed 4 pressures against the Saints. That's unbelievable. Conversely, the Saints line, who you played earlier, allowed 12 pressures. So their line held up well. And that's like with Kyler Murray, because he holds on to the ball. Like, he'll escape it, but he does generate some pressure. So I guess their line was better than their talent would suggest. But Cody Ford's a pro. Cody Ford only played 1 game so far this year and was really good, but he was a starter for the Bills last year. Same thing with Billy Price. I think he was on the Giants, or no, he was on the Giants last year. He was a starter. Like, he's a multi-year starter in the league. So that's going to be big. It's just going to come down, honestly, to how is Jefferson going to play against that defense, because they did a really good job on Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams and A.J. Brown. Is this going to be a Jefferson game? And if it's not, can Thielen and KJ win their matchups? And I just thought of it. This
I
is
think.
what
Oh, I think this is a game where the offense just maybe the Cardinals stick around because they're scoring so much, but I think this is a game where the offense has to take over.
I need a 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. I need it, Kirk. My energy is gonna be there. I'm gonna be.
And then you're gonna dap him up after the game. You like that?
You
Yeah.
like that? What was I gonna say? Oh, this is what I wanted to talk to you about. So there was a stat put out, just showing it was quarterbacks, but it's kind of teams as a whole, how they performed in the passing game EPA wise, which I think is a very flawed stat for quarterbacks, but very good for just judging offenses. Against man coverage, Vikings are bad, but they're top three. Maybe things changed after week 7, but going into week 7, the weeks Vikings played, top 3 against zone coverage. So I think that makes sense considering your personnel, mainly Thielen, being savvy, having a connection, finding soft spots. But do you think the problem in terms of performance in EPA against man is lack of separation from your receivers, or when you're playing man, that usually means you're sending extra pressure? So what do you think that is? Like, why do you think the Vikings struggle against man coverage?
I think it's because the other guys struggle to separate. It's very easy to blame this on Jefferson because against man coverage he hasn't been very good. But I mean, people are triple teaming, double teaming, triple teaming him. They're true double teams, but with triple team shade. And Adam Thielen is just slowing down winning, and KJ Osborne has never been a guy that could just win. They're both zone receivers. Adam Thielen is great at settling into zones. Irv Smith hasn't been the best catching the ball, and we haven't really ran much screen action. Not that you really can against man, because you're always going to be down a guy. Against zone, it makes a lot of sense, and some of the blame has to fall on Kirk when it comes to man, because I do think this season, at least, it hasn't been a problem in seasons past, but this season it seems like he's locking on to Jefferson more, and that might be because he knows that Adam's slowing down and he knows all this, but he is locking on to Jefferson for maybe half a second too long, and that's just it's not. You can't do that right now against man.
Yeah,
Would you agree?
Yeah, it's honestly, I think the locking into Jefferson is kind of overblown. I think it's kind of all roads. I'm sorry to single you out. You're a great guy. All roads lead to Adam Thielen. When Adam Thielen is not a number 2 receiver anymore, you're looking at him, but then you immediately revert back to Jefferson, because the guy who should be feasting when Jefferson is getting all the attention is not. He's not winning one-on-one matchups, and he can make some contested catches, but he's not that big. He's not that much of a just throw it up. Adam Thielen's down there, and it's and that's never. And KJ Osborne's not that guy. KJ Osborne's just
He's not.
He's a fine number 3. Honestly, I think he got a little bit overrated because of the Kirk Cousins effect of, if especially if Thielen's hurt, someone's going to need to get the yards, and he performed well and he made some clutch catches, but he's not. He's just a guy.
Mm-hmm.
Thielen is becoming just a guy, and that's a problem. And I think it's hopefully going to come down to maybe they kind of instill more option routes, some quicker throws. Seems like a lot of longer developing routes. They're just kind of like safety valve throws. That's where I think a tight end could really come in.
I think he got to get, and people are going to like this, but I think he got him as the offensive coordinator. You have to let Kirk make the decisions. It seems like right now he's following the playbook very strictly, which that isn't a really bad thing because it seems to have worked before in the Rams offense last year. But you just got to, I feel like Kevin O'Connell, and honestly, I don't blame him for it because Kevin O'Connell is that much of a mastermind when it comes to the offense. But I think Kevin O'Connell's kind of just like be that smart guy, but let Kirk do it as well.
Yeah, well, I would say if you're actually that smart, no, I'm not trying to say this like to sound condescending, but create a system of options. You have your general parameters, but within each sort of thing, like you have your three checks, and read what's going on. Move Jefferson around, move Dalvin out to the slot, and then move him back in just to kind of diagnose how things are. Um, just kind of do these things, and if you see, well, you know what, they're manned up, and there are tells you can see based off personnel. If they're wanting to send extra rushers, if they have a guy like, let's just say you're playing Philly and you have Robert Quinn out there, that they're going to want to get him out there as a pass rusher. So you kind of see, or if they're in 3-4, you got Robert Quinn, that he's probably going to be pass rushing. You're not going to really send him out into coverage. Move a guy over to say, okay, we'll force him into coverage or make them move, and like all these different things just to test things out. Mm-hmm. Test the other team's personnel. Do that, and then kind of say, like, if box stacked, if in man, if in zone, like stick to long route, short route.
Yeah.
Again, it goes over my head, just kind of that general idea.
Yeah. Connecting it back to the Cardinals game, I think that you gotta just. This is such a bad unit on their defense. I know they've held the Devontae Adams and these great receivers, but like this is just not a good unit. And Dalvin, we should expect Dalvin Cook to run all over them, no matter what your opinion is on Dalvin. I don't care. Like he will and should run all over them. They have no linebackers. They have no front seven. Neither of it. It's entirely true.
You're being awfully disrespectful.
I'm not. It's probably the worst front seven in the league.
What? Is JJ Watt healthy?
Yes, but JJ Watt is washed.
JJ Watt is
washed. He's not JJ Watt.
He's not. Oh no, he's not JJ Watt. JJ Watt, when he was JJ Watt alone, could make a defense at least solid. But he's not a liability. He's still a pretty good player. I really like Zach Allen, who's out of BC. He's really turning it around. Marcus Golden's a good player. I don't know much about Victor Dimukeje. He was a 6th-round pick out of Duke last year, so I'll refrain from thoughts on him. Isaiah Simmons, people knock him because he was drafted too high, but considering the way what his roles and responsibilities are, he's a good player. Zaven Collins is also good. So this is not the worst front seven in the league.
Zaven Collins isn't good.
Zaven Collins is
a liability.
Stop. Maybe he's out.
I honestly, I feel like we're getting into like too many ticky-tack arguments.
We are.
I think
how do we wrap up
as a whole, the Vikings need to dominate on offense at least. I don't expect the defense to dominate just because mobile quarterbacks are just with bad not bad, but below average cornerbacks in Pat Pete and Cam Dantzler. It's hard to contain those really mobile quarterbacks because you're not going to be able to, like, the coverage is just going to, all that jazz. I don't really feel like I'm losing my words, so much going on in my life right now. I got ratioed by a Caleb Evans badly. It almost has 2,000 likes now.
Oh my God. Yeah. You know how it's the mob. We were talking about this earlier and I kind of said the take to Evo and I'm not dealing with it. And Evo.
The reason because you reminded me of it, but I was speaking with Mike and I said almost the exact same thing. And you reminded me and you're like, yeah, I don't really want to tweet it. And I was like, oh, well, I mean, I agree with it. He doesn't want to do it. It's an engagement farm. Like who said any publicity is or bad publicity is good publicity?
All publicity is good publicity.
All publicity, like getting ratioed by Caleb Evans is never a good thing. But and what pisses me off is people are trying to act like I said he was going to just be this awful player, and it's like I have no doubt, or I do have quite a bit of doubt actually, but he can reach his potential, which is a mid-level starter in this league. The kid doesn't have star potential. Let's be honest with ourselves. If we had that 4th round pick, and if we would have drafted him where we sat at 4th, this tweet never goes up. Sure, I would have much rather had Tariq Woolen, but hindsight's 2020.
Exactly.
But it's the trade. It's not the player I have a problem with. Love the guy.
It's the process. It's the process of being in a pick deficit. It's not the 7th round. It's the 4th round. That's the mid round where a lot of that's the chip that is the main currency, because a lot of teams, because the way the Vikings are set up, they're limited cap space. There aren't players on the market who are worth day 1 and day 2 picks. That 4th round pick is the chip where you can bring in a legit difference maker at the trade deadline, and you don't have it. And you're constantly behind the 8 ball. And the comp pick that they thought they were going to get for Conklin and Xavier Woods were 5th and 6th. They thought they were going to get a 4th. They didn't get it. So now you're completely out of the 4th round, even after the comp stuff, unless you trade down again. But now you're at least going to be making the playoffs, picking in the 20s. So if you're trading down, you're not even going to get that 1 pride value.
It's just like, if we wanted to say it simply, yes, he's just a rookie. But that 4th round pick, I said this earlier, we're searching for Super Bowls, not Twitter interaction. All right.
Yeah.
If a Caleb Evans had never replied in a group chat or replied on Twitter, I guarantee you, if I send that tweet out, it's getting 3 likes and maybe a reply saying, "Oh, but he's just a rookie."
Yeah.
That's the reality.
And completely not understanding your actual argument.
Yes, my argument isn't that he's bad. It's that the fact that we traded a 4th round pick that could very well have, and we can still go trade for people, but it's going to cost more capital than it needs to. That 4th round pick could be used on a guy like Greedy Williams is a guy I know you don't like, but he's still a guy who is probably going to be a cornerback 2 on this team if he's traded to us. There's many other guys that you mentioned on the phone earlier. You don't have to bring them up. There's field stretchers such as all these guys. I'm not in the right headspace to do this, honestly. But
yeah, we can wrap it up. We're over an hour.
Yeah. So I guess I'll turn up the music.
Oh wait, final pick. What's your score prediction, Vikings?
Do I want to go with what I think should happen or what I think will happen?
What you think will happen?
Actually, I think it's going to be both. I think it will happen. I'm going to go with 33 Vikings, 24 Cardinals.
Wow, we are really close. I had 30-24.
Hey, great minds think alike. If you think like us, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Even if you don't, all publicity is good publicity. Subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications. Follow us on Twitter at EvoKnowsAll31 and at RealJoeSpinoza, along with our channel's Twitter account at EisenNFL. You definitely want to follow Joe. He's going to have some great things coming out this weekend on Twitter as the music ends, and it should start starting up. Once it starts up, I'll kick us out.
And we're gonna the music.
There we go.
Oh. Good night, everyone.
All right, this is such a botched episode. Goodbye, and have a good day.